The best type of counterplay that the defender can work with is active counterplay. And my next game is a very good example of active counterplay. It's a very high level encounter between Vladimir Kramnik and Garry Kasparov, and it comes from the Linares tournament in 1999. The opening is a Grunfeld defence, and in particular the exchange variation, which is highly theoretical. Kasparov, of course, had many very interesting duels with Anatoly Karpov in their epic series of matches back in the 1980s and 1990s with the exchange Grunfeld. So Kramnik, we can guarantee, was very well prepared coming into this game. In fact, the two players debate a very heavily analysed line of the exchange variation here, where Kasparov plays his bishop out to g4 and actually sacrifices a pawn after bishop takes f7 check. This is the so-called Seville variation, which was a very hot topic during the 1987 World Championship match between Kasparov and Karpov. White wins a pawn. It's only a double pawn, but it is perhaps an important pawn. And we reach a critical position now. White's got this tower of strength, the passed d pawn here, and it seems as though, well, black really shouldn't have much compensation for it. That bishop on g7 is blocked in by the pawn on e5, and the knight on a5 is out on a limb. But this is quite a surprising position, and we will see over the next few moves Kasparov developing very active counterplay. Of course, if he just sits there, white will probably just play a sequence of moves like queen d3, h3, king g1, rook f1, and then black will have absolutely no compensation. White will just find a way a little later on in the game to get that d pawn rolling. The d pawn is the main overall danger to black. So black must act now, and Kasparov does this with knight c4. He lops off the bishop, and then he brings his queen to h4. Well, in view of the attack on the two black pawns there, h3 is a reasonable reply, and now black gets to put his bishop on h6. So by using active counterplay as his defensive currency, black is trying to tie white down to stop him from exploiting his natural advantage in the position, which is of course the d5 pawn. White puts his queen in behind the d5 pawn, getting ready to rumble. Rook f8 check, queen f2 check, and now another very surprising move, queen e3, which I've no doubt at all was the product of home preparation. After all, to offer the exchange of pieces in a position where you're a passed pawn down, well, this is a very brave move. But perhaps white's difficulties in realising this material advantage are seen in the line where the queens are exchanged and white plays the logical move rook d1, putting his rook in behind the passed pawn. Now black stays active with rook f2, and if he brings his king up, it's really difficult for white to actually take this game further. The bishop on e3 dominates. The rook on f2 is ready to come to c2 at the drop of a hat, which will put pressure on both the knight and the pawn at a2. And if black wins the pawn back, and especially if he wins that pawn on a2 back, then white's going to have to really start worrying about black's asset, which is the passed pawn, which will be the passed pawn on a7. So, by keeping active and staying active, by keeping his counterplay concrete, Kasparov is stopping Kramnik from realising his extra pawn advantage. If a4, just continuing with this analysis, king e7 and then king h2, we have bishop f4 check, and then we have rook c2. This would be a typical line, where black is staying active and stopping white from doing anything at all. If white tries to do something, and he could try by invading with his knight, then I think bishop d2 is a really excellent move. And if we go check and take king e7, and white's difficulties remain. He cannot coordinate his pieces effectively in this position. Black has at least equality here due to his brilliant coordination. So queen c4 was played in the game, and now b5. Again, preparation. Queen takes b5, deflecting the queen away from c4, and now in comes the rook with rook f2. I have the suspicion this whole game was actually preparation. That's certainly what it looks like. As the queen comes in, Kasparov keeps his rook and his queen active with bishop f8. There's another check, and now d6. Kramnik would not have played such a move unless he calculated it all out or he'd analysed it in advance, because of course he's giving away his knight on e2. Kasparov takes it, there's a check, there's another check, and the passed pawn comes forward. Very rapid indeed. But now comes a very accurate move, queen to d3. Again, counterplay by means of keeping the queen active, an excellent defence by putting the queen behind the passed pawn. White pushes on. Black takes time out to safety the king. And the reason he does this is that after rook g1, he's going rook f3. Another active move which saves the day. The threat of rook takes h3 leads to mate in 2. So this is why queen b8 is played, so that the queen could defend backwards along the diagonal. But rook takes h3 comes anyway. And this splendid game ended in a draw after queen e4 check. Because of course if king h2, bishop e5 check is the move. So the game would naturally end after rook g2, queen e1 check. Once again king h2 is answered by bishop e5. So rook g1, queen e4 check. Draw agreed. So that's a super example of active counterplay, saving the day, and the defender came up trumps and made his draw.